say, Mayor, what do you think? Should we bring this candidate into the mix as well? And more than often, we will do that. Or I might see just the opposite. I've had that happen too once in a while, where I have a candidate ranked pretty high, but you've looked at him and you've made the determination that person is not a good fit for our community. I then take that into consideration as well. So then the next step, obviously, is then to narrow that list down to about maybe 7, 8, 9 candidates. And I like to then coordinate phone interviews. Once again, I invite you to be a part of that process as well. Sometimes, a few cases, we might Skype them in, but that takes a lot of coordination, but I'm willing to do that as well. Most of the time, the phone interview will work just fine. We'll all sit maybe at a table like this with the speakerphone on. I ask all the questions, you listen and take notes. At the end of that, then I should say to you, you've now heard from 7, 8 candidates, rank them for me from 1 to 8. And then we put your scores up in a large sheet of paper and see how things shake out. That's how I like to determine who is the top 4 candidates. How you ranked them, how you felt about them hearing on the phone. And I've got a series of questions that I'll ask them, but I share those questions with you ahead of time. So if there's a question that you really want me to ask, it will get asked that night. And so once we've done that, that narrows it down to our finalists. And I like to do about 4. I've done as few as 3, I've done as many as 5, and one time we did 6. But to me, a good number is 4 candidates, but I also like to have backup candidates. Because I've learned in this process, people get other job offers, people get cold feet. You know, they get down into this process and suddenly, the most recent situation I had was I told the individual, we're gonna do a very thorough criminal background check as well. Well, he had something in his past. He was quite a ways in his past, but he knew it would be uncovered. We had given him an opportunity in the telephone interview to share with us if there was anything like that, and he chose not to. So because of that, the mayor said, I don't want anything to do with that individual. They were not upfront with us. So people drop out because of various reasons. Then, of course, it's very important to do the reference checks, you would typically do. I also like to work with your police department and work with them if they'd like to work with me on criminal background checks. And I've done that a couple different ways. One is to work with the DCI and I'll see if there's anything there. But another way I've done it is when we get to the finalist, then we do a very thorough criminal background check on that finalist. Typically, you're not going to find people applying for these jobs with criminal backgrounds, but once in a while you do. There was a case in Centerville, Iowa, where they had an interim that had a criminal background, but they found out after they had been appointed. So it's important to do that sort of thing.
Do you do a credit check?
And yes, we like to work with candidates and do a credit check as well. I think that's important because you're going to ask them to basically be working with finances. And if they haven't done a good job in their own finances, you at least need to know that. Doesn't mean that you would disqualify them, you know, like if they had a bankruptcy or something, but at least you need to be aware of it so you know what's going on.
What about the 4 or 5, the finalists that we have in terms of criminal checks or background checks?
We can do it either way. I can do it all 4 of them, or we can pick the top candidate and say, your appointment is subject to a criminal background check. I've done it both ways. I usually like to do this process the way you want to do it. I've laid out the process for you in my proposal, but I'm very open to tweaking it and changing it any way that you feel comfortable with. So I can basically tell you what I've done in the past, what has worked, and then you give me directions to what you'd like to do. If you were to select me, I'd like to be back up here within the next week or 2 and meet with all of you or a committee or however you want to do it and say, okay, this is the process. Is there any area that you want to change? Any area you want to modify in any way? I'm very open to that. The other thing I'm very open to, I'll get into that later, but once we've done pick the candidates for the interviews, the interview process, obviously, I think probably the Bryn Mawr group has said the same thing. It's a 2-part process. In the morning, we divide the council and mayor up into teams of 2 or 3, and the candidates then go from room to room, kind of a round-robin approach, and you'll have a list of questions that you can choose from. And then in the afternoon, then each candidate comes before the entire council. And then, of course, on the evening before that, the Friday evening, there's an opportunity for a reception if you'd like to do that as well. The goal is, in the end, you're gonna have a thick 3-ring binder of information about all the candidates that you'll get a few days ahead of time. I like to get it in your hands at least 2 or 3 days ahead of time, so you got some time to read it and understand it. Then you get to meet the candidates informally on Friday night, just talking about the weather, their hobbies, or their interests. And then you meet them on Saturday morning and across the table from them. And a little bit more formal interview, but not quite as formal as the council meeting. And then, of course, the final step is when you have them come before the entire council. So you see these candidates in a number of different settings, from a number of different perspectives. Obviously, hopefully, we are pretty close to unanimous decision who the top candidate is. It's not always unanimous, but what I like to do is I have to, like I did with the telephone interviews, I like to have each individual council member rank the candidates for me from 1 to 4. And we put those numbers on the board. And you kind of step back and say, okay, is there a candidate that has come to the top? That's typically the case. It's rare that, with this many council members, that one candidate will get a '1 rating from everyone. But hopefully, most of the council members have given that person a 1, and maybe the other people have given them a 2, so that there's a consensus candidate. It's not an easy thing to do, because you all come at this from different perspectives and different outlooks. And so what might be very appealing to one council member from a candidate may not be quite so appealing to the next. So it's the collective wisdom of all of you that then hopefully will result in the selection of the best candidate for independence at this time. And I've come to learn that trust the collective wisdom of the entire council. And I've done about 10 or 12 of these in the last 3 or 4 years. And I've got a pretty good track record as I've watched the process unfold, saying, I think this is the candidate that will be the candidate they will select. And I have hit the nail on the head every time. Because it seems like one candidate always just kind of rises to the top. And so this kind of the fun part of the whole process is to see that happen. And you almost see that candidate start to gel with the council too, and kind of start to form this bond very, very early in the process. So, then, of course, is once you've made your selection, who is the top candidate? We have to negotiate. Now, many cities have employment agreements. You're not legally obligated to have an employment agreement if you don't want to. Did Steve have an employment agreement?
Yes.
Most candidates will kind of push for that. But not every city has an employment agreement. It's an option. But those that, if the candidate you've selected really pushes for it, then of course you're obviously going to have to decide if you're not. If you're going to do an employment agreement, I like to meet with you at least a month or 2 before the whole process, so I know what your parameters are. What can you live with this agreement, and what can't you? Because I got to be honest with the candidates too. If they say to me, well, I got to have a 12-month severance clause, I want to be able to say right up front, I've talked to the council about that, and that's not going to fly. So you got to give me some parameters that I can work with, and then I have to then tell the candidates. Because I've learned over the years that I have to work well with 2 groups of people. I've got to work well with you, but I've also got to work well with the potential pool of candidates that I have to maintain credibility and respect with as well. Because if they don't get the job here, there's other cities down the road that they will apply for. And so if they don't feel comfortable with me and respect me, then I won't have success in the future. So I have to be very upfront with all of you on what the candidate is all about, their background. But I also have to be very upfront with the candidates. So as I get to know you and get to know your community, if I pick up things, I want to be very honest with these candidates. Because the last thing I want is for you to come to me 6 months from now and say, Callahan, why didn't you tell me this about the candidate? Or I don't want them to come to me 6 months from now, because I'm not leaving this area, I'm staying here. I don't want them to come to me at a Northeast Iowa Regional League meeting like we had tomorrow night. I don't know if any of you are going, but I think I've seen some of you at those meetings. I don't want them to come to me and say, Callahan, why didn't you tell me of this about independence before I accepted that position? So I'm very honest with both sides. The goal, of course, is to make both sides feel good about that decision. So,
When you do your interview process, you were talking about with the council and stuff, do you ever include like people from the community or staff members to interview also and kind of give
and that's kind of your call.
opinions? Okay.
I like to do that. Obviously, when I put the position profile together, I like to reach out to you and have individual interviews with you. also like you to tell me if there's people in the community I should talk to. For example, I see you have your own municipal electric utility. Macokota has their own municipal electric utility, where I worked years ago. Years ago, when I first started there, I was both the electric utility manager and the city manager. I had my hands full. But I'd like to reach out to people like that, your Chamber of Commerce, your Economic Development Group, and get their perspectives. Ultimately, in the end, it's your decision as a council, but it sure doesn't hurt to hear what the other folks in the community have to say. And then, if you're so inclined, I like to do the public reception on Friday night and invite some of those folks to be a part of that, so that they can meet these candidates and offer us their opinion as well.
Okay.
Any other questions that I can ask of you, or anything at all?
you,
I'm assuming everyone saw my proposal.
Yep.
You obviously are aware of Independence and a little bit of our history. Do you feel we are sitting in a good position in finding another city manager at this point?
I do. Obviously, Steve is leaving under good circumstances. Had Steve been told to leave, it would be an entirely different story. Because then you would have had a history there of when Alan Johnson was here, that didn't end, well, he handled it.
Right.
And that would have happened twice, then that would have made this job even more difficult. Particularly candidates from Iowa who are kind of watching what's going on in your community. And those that are not from Iowa, if they're a good candidate, they've checked into this. And so with Steve leaving under good circumstances, that's a real plus. And you have been in the news a little bit. I watch KCRG News, and I get this Gazette, and you were in the news last year. That's kind of in the past, and I think that's good. There's been enough distance there that won't scare off candidates. And you've had some change, and from my picking up from Steve, it's good change. So I think that'll be a plus. The key thing is a smart candidate will call Steve and say, Steve, first of all, why'd you leave? And is this a good town? And my gut feeling is Steve is going to give you, quote, a good reference. That's the key. And they may even call Alan Johnson. They may call Alan and say, what was your perspective when you were there? Was it now 4 years ago or 4.5, 5 years ago? Yeah, and if I find out a candidate has